We often hear the stories of parents warning their children about the dangers of strangers. But the reality is, children are more likely to come to harm by people they know and trust than people they don't. Here at Stolen Lives, we believe cases involving crimes against children do not get the attention they deserve. These cases are important, and the victims should not be forgotten. We want to give a voice to those whose lives are lost or stolen. Cases like the brutal murder of Jerilee Underwood, searching for answers for the identity of baby lollipops, and the mysterious unsolved disappearances of Orrin and Orson West. Listen to Stolen Lives on Apple Podcasts, the Acast app, or wherever you listen to great podcasts, like the one you are listening to today.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. Today's episode is about a lesser-known community, and I say community out of respect for those who were there and don't like the word cult. This was suggested to me by my friend Sheila. I had never heard of the Zendik Arts Farm until she told me about it last year. Today, I'm going to tell you about this community, what I have read about the founders, and with permission from one ex-member of Zendik, Helen Zuman, I will tell her experiences and frequently asked questions when it comes to the Zendik Arts Farm from her blogs and Helen's book. Without her personal experiences documented online and in her book, it's hard to find what really went on behind the scenes of what seems like a great place on the outside with a good message. A good amount of people with the best of intentions joined this community, and some got tangled in the darker side they experienced in this community, while others had a better experience. I want to make sure that I'm telling all sides as best I can with pure facts and experiences. If you want your voice to be heard and you're an ex-member, please reach out to me and we can do a Zoom interview. I am completely open to that and I encourage it because I'd love the listeners to hear your personal experience. Some members would not completely allow me to use their words, so I did my best to explain what I gathered from what I read without taking from the source at all. So let's begin. Wulf Zendik was born in El Paso, Texas on October 7, 1920. He was a bohemian, an environmentalist, a poet, an author, and a musician. He created the Zendik community in 1969 with his life partner. A lot of people also may know this commune as Zendik Arts Farm. At different times, there were Zendik communities spread out all over the U.S. They moved around from Florida, Southern California, Texas, North Carolina, and West Virginia. Wulf said that he was, quote, undiscovered beat, and he wrote 3 novels, A Quest Among the Bewildered, Black Hawk, Diary of an Eco-Warrior, and Zendik. The summary of A Quest Among the Bewildered, which was published after Wulf had passed away in 2001, quote, A Quest Among the Bewildered is Wulf Zendik's first full-length work, written at the artistic height of the Beat generation. More than 40 years later, this tough, witty, semi-autobiographical take on the madness surging through the veins of modern-day culture still hits home like a hammer blow, detailing one man's search for love and integrity in a sea of lies, loneliness, and deceit. Written in riveting free-form prose, this is art on the edge of a live-wire ride into the psyche of a deeply human, deeply humane genius. End quote. About the author, it says, quote, Wulf Zendik was a primal, pragmatic visionary who refused to treat art and life as separate events. Throughout a lifetime that spanned the vast and sprawling 20th century, from the age of the Model T to the age of artificial intelligence, Wulf brought his keen heretical eye to the culture of his birth. With piercing insight and imagination, he revealed the root cause of a corrupt society, ultimately charting the way out of the mind-numbing mental prison that surrounds us all. Wulf's life and art were a process of mutual discovery, a masterful combination of aesthetics and integrity. With the aching beauty of A Quest Among the Bewildered, he began a high-blown philosophical pursuit which continued on through the fire, fury, and sensuality of Black Hawk, the last American warrior, and the epic grandeur of Zendik. Poet, novelist, musician, essayist, orator, and the inventor, Wulf Zendik's tremendous legacy includes the open-ended concept of equilibrium, which means ecological equilibrium, and creevolution, which is the creative evolution, together form the basis of a new way of living on planet Earth. Zendik Farm, the cooperative artist culture, which was Wulf's home and creation, continues to thrive as the living embodiment of his benevolent ideals. End quote. When this book released in 2001, the Zendik community was still active even after Wulf had passed away in 1999. Wulf had a life partner named Carol Merson, but to most people she was known as Arol Wulf. They also had a daughter together named Fawn. Arol and Wulf founded the Zendik commune together, and they had some help from friends and artists. This commune they created was located outside of Los Angeles, California, on Wulf's parents' property. From there, they would go around the country and create a Zendik community wherever they settled. The Zendik Arts Farm community is defined by some former members as a, quote, sex cult. Some ex-members don't like that it is portrayed so salaciously online. Zendik Farm was, however, scary and somewhat dark for others. If you weren't a part of this community, you'd think, and for some it was, just a bunch of cool hippies selling their shirts and bumper stickers that said, "Stop bitching and start a revolution." With Wulf Zendik talking about the arts, his philosophy on life, and how their lifestyle was environmentally friendly, which he wanted others to understand so they could make the world a better place. That all sounds great and fine, but what was really happening on the inside of this community? That's what I wanted to get to the bottom of in these episodes. Wulf Zendik, from what I found, could have sex with anyone in the community that he wanted to at any time. He also told members of that community who they could and could not date, as well as who could and could not have sex together. Even though some ex-members do refer to this as a sex cult, there are ex-members of that community who don't see it that way at all. Wulf wrote, quote, "Possessive attitudes about sex lead to jealousy, hostility, hate, violence, murder," end quote. So Wulf's answer to this issue was to merge and widen personal and intimate belonging and interconnections outside of the couple themselves. For those who were in relationships, it was essential to free them from their cravings to stick to one another like glue, and this was for the greater good of existence and to survive, according to Wulf. It seems it was all about the men farming, at least the majority being men doing so, and doing all of the outside labor, while the women seemed in videos as if they stayed inside, cooked all the meals for 40 to 50 people, doing the inside work, etc. and they were all doing their best to improve the environment and society. Most of the people in the community were in their late 20s or early 30s. People like me and you on the outside get curious about what was happening beneath the surface of this community. In the early 2000s, the community had uprooted and moved to Marlinton, West Virginia to be closer to Washington, D.C. Some Zendiks would go out to sell their t-shirts, magazines, and bumper stickers up and down the sidewalks around the city. The group told people they met that they were, quote, tribal living, and it was a way of life, that they were saving the environment and they did not accept or approve of consumerism. The commune, when members were trying to invite new people in, was presented as what Wulf's idea was about society, and as a getaway and a safe place from the world. At the end of part 2 of this two-parter, there is a 30-minute audio of Wulf talking to the members of the community in the mid-1990s. Now, it came off to me personally that it was his way or the highway. I don't think that's a controversial statement, and I believe a lot of people have not so positive opinions about the founders as people, and at the same time, a lot of us don't think that the vast majority, if not all members of the community, were setting out to do any harm. So, Wulf to me starts to make sense on certain topics, but then, in my opinion, starts talking in circles at times. Wulf is like most founders of these communities who seem to me that they believe they know more than anyone else. He was, after all, a self-proclaimed guru and called himself that in the video. He also puts down anyone who doesn't think the way he does. I'd really like your thoughts about it if you choose to listen to it next week. Wulf claims he wants everyone to be able to work together and be like a family, but people aren't going to listen to you or take you seriously if you treat them like they're beneath you and that you're smarter or better than them. It's that same arrogance that some Christians and other religious groups have as well. Same goes with people in politics, and the list goes on. Nobody is going to give you or what you're talking about a chance if they know you're crapping on them. It just doesn't work that way. One ex-member named Abby joined in the late 70s. During that time, the group was in Florida and about to move to California. By 1986, the community was on the move, looking for air not as polluted and more space to farm. They settled down near the Mexico border, but found that that place was too dry and decided to move to Texas around 1991. Abby left Zendik around 1991 and got married in 1995. From what I read, he isn't at all angry or disgruntled about his experience at Zendik, because what I take from it is he would not have met certain people, and he does believe in the message that Zendik was promoting, which I completely get. I also think most of the message is pretty good. I'm all for bettering society, the environment, and so on. I also took away from his writings from a very long time ago that if he had not experienced those 13 years he spent at the Zendik farm, he wouldn't be who he is today or where he is. Abby told me that I could use his blog under fair use, but that I would have to keep that to 15 seconds, which I'm not sure if I can sum up his experience in such a short amount of time. However, I know his experience was quite different than Helen Zuman's, even though he acknowledges what she says is a real thing that was going on, and he states in his blog that Helen's FAQ that I'm going to read in a minute is also true. Abby doesn't like the way that Zendik was portrayed in the media, much like when I talked to David Thibodeau from Waco. I completely respect all sides, and it's not for me to judge because I wasn't there. We only know what we can find online and what we as outsiders read and hear from the people who were there. I do want to make it clear that everyone there did not have the same experience or take away the same opinions and thoughts when they left or when the group disbanded. Their feelings, thoughts, and experiences are their own and are all important and valid. I want you as the listener to walk away from these episodes making up your own minds about what you feel about this community. Not what I may think or any of the ex-members, but what you think. Dive into the articles and sources about Zendik Farm and ex-members. I'm not really allowed to go into much of Abby's blog, but if you'd like to find it and read it for yourself, I'm sure you can type in OBBIE Zendik Farm, and you'll probably come across it. I still extend an invite for an interview if Abby would like to come on and talk about his experience and time there. Now, I'm going to take a commercial break and tell you about today's sponsor. This holiday season, if you're looking for ways to skip the trip to the post office and dodge all of that crazy holiday shopping traffic, why not save time and money with Stamps.com? Stamps.com lets you compare rates, print labels, and access exclusive discounts on UPS and USPS services all year long. These discounts you cannot find anywhere else, such as up to 40% off USPS rates and 76% off UPS. You'll save so much time and money that you'll wonder why you didn't start this sooner. Sign up with promo code POD, P-O-D, for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, and enter the code POD, P-O-D. Helen Zuman, an ex-member, gave me permission to share her words and experience at Zendik. She has a memoir out called Mating in Captivity, which I think you should all check out. From December 1st to January the 6th, her book will be on sale wherever you get your ebooks for only 99 cents. It's definitely worth buying. I'm going to read to you from her live journal when she had recently left Zendik. This journal entry is her experience and her answers to frequently asked questions about Zendik Farm. It's lengthy but so interesting. So thank you, Helen, for letting me use your words and letting me share your experience at the farm. These episodes would not be possible if it weren't for you. In 2018, she updated her journal entry. I posted this FAQ nearly 10 years ago, when Zendik was still going strong, and I was hoping to curb its abuses by providing detailed information about how its particular brand of mindfuckery worked. I pretty much ignored Zendik's positive aspects, since you could hear all about those from any current Zendik or read about them at zendik.org. Since then, Arol has passed away, the farm has dissolved, and each of us who lived there has gone about composting their Zendik years in their own particular way. I'm choosing to let the frequently asked questions stand as a historical record. However, I no longer consider it my most illuminating or nourishing account of life at Zendik. That honor goes to my memoir, Mating in Captivity, which is on sale now and at many libraries. If yours doesn't have it, you can request that they order it, and wherever books are sold. In the book, I tried, per Tristine Rayner's advice, to tell the whole truth with love. Many years of turning my pile, far more fragrant and fertile now than it was in 2008, made that mission possible. She writes, one more thing. If you found my FAQ by Googling Zendik after meeting someone who used to live there, please do not use it to dismiss that person or their intelligence or their unique experience. We Zendiks were and are a wildly divergent band, idiosyncratic badasses. We moved to Zendik in hopes of doing something beautiful, while escaping the everyday catastrophe of business as usual. As I've said elsewhere, Zendik harbored some of the smartest, boldest, kindest imaginers and creators I have ever met. Most of us have gained significant wisdom and insight from our Zendik misadventures. Okay, on to the very vintage, yet potentially still useful Zendik FAQ. If you are a Zendik, an ex-Zendik who still believes, an ex-Zendik who no longer believes, a concerned friend or relative of a current or ex-Zendik, someone who's come in casual contact with Zendiks and is curious about them, then this FAQ is for you. Quote, a note on sources. I lived at Zendik Farm for nearly 5 years, from fall 1999 through fall of 2004. While there and since leaving, I had and have had extensive conversations with members who lived there before I did, and members who left after I left. My own experiences and these conversations are the sources of my information. I do not claim to be presenting a historical portrait of Zendik Farm over the past 4 decades, though I do believe the patterns of coercion have not changed much. Rather, my purpose is to answer the questions, what can I expect if I move there, and what's it like to live there now? I should say again that Zendik Farm is now dissolved, but this is when it was still ongoing, so this is why this FAQ was written by Helen. In 2010, she updated her post, and she said, as you can see, the date stamp on this journal entry is December 27, 2011. When I originally posted this FAQ in September of 2008, I dated it far in the future in order to ensure that it would remain easily accessible as the topmost post in my blog. The previous note on sources was written at that time, almost 2 years ago. So in 2010, she said over the past 2 years, some aspects of life at Zendik have changed. Marriage is all the rage now, as is having babies. Fawn was first to marry. Most in the younger generation of Zendik women have followed her lead. In addition to hawking magazines and CDs on the street, they sell paper bead jewelry at fairs and festivals. Profitable, I'm guessing, but only because no one making the jewelry is paid a wage. Arol, though still as God-complexed as ever, has ceded some portion of her executive power to Fawn. Arol's nervous breakdown of a couple of years ago seemed to hasten the process of hereditary title transfer. This past spring, Revel, Arol's boyfriend of 11 years, left the farm. She said, quote, I am not rewriting the FAQ to reflect these recent changes. Rather, I am letting it stand as a document detailing Zendik as it was during the period in which I knew it best. All cults experience sea changes during their life cycles. They must, in order to survive. How do leaders account to adherents for the fact that, after X number of years, the world still has not been remade in the cult's image? Or the fact that the spaceship has not still arrived to take the faithful home? Or the fact that a tropical paradise has not been forged from the South American jungle? They reinterpret the mission, revise the suite of activities, juggle the social rules, and so on. Lather, rinse, repeat, as needed. Despite the above-mentioned alterations and others, I have not encountered credible evidence that Zendik has become any more democratic or any less coercive. Most importantly, the Zendiks have demonstrated no advance in their level of self-awareness. they still have not addressed with any degree of honesty the criticisms and concerns put forth by ex-members. Until I see this sort of change occur, I can take no other claims of substantial change for the better seriously. So now we start the frequently asked questions that she wrote in 2008. It says the FAQ is divided into these following sections: art, babies and children, environmentalism, activism, revolution, everyday life, governance and hierarchy, guns, healthcare, honesty, if you have a loved one at Zendik, language, money and resources, names, population and demographics, psychic phenomena, selling, sex and relationships, the cult question, and work. The question: I'm an artist, writer, musician. I'll have lots of time to focus on my art if I move to Zendik, right? The answer she wrote: wrong, you'll spend all of your time working, eating, sleeping, selling, dating, attending meetings, and rapidly listening to Arol's extemporaneous diatribes and speeches. If you do have free time, you won't necessarily spend it on your art, since you'll soon be persuaded that your desire to do art is not necessarily consonant with survival, and in any case, whatever artistic impulses you brought with you from the outside world are corrupt, hence not worth indulging. Also, as you learn to stop yourself from criticizing Zendik and disown your pre-Zendik life, you'll have less and less that's personal to express. Your artistic impulses will be encouraged in direct proportion to their usefulness in creating Zendik propaganda. If everyone at Zendik is an artist, why are there so few contributors to the magazine? The Zendik magazine is not a forum for diverse or personal expression. Rather, it is a vehicle for Zendik propaganda. Wulf and Arol, the two perennially featured authors, have a far better handle on Zendik orthodoxy than anyone else does. Hence, their voices dominate the magazine. The Zendik say they practice something called life artistry. What's that? A good idea in theory. In practice, it's a mechanism for dissuading the rank and file from pursuing personal art projects. Here's how it works. If you're a life artist, then everything you do, digging a ditch, cooking a meal, selling a t-shirt, it's art. This means you can find total fulfillment in accomplishing whatever utilitarian task the leadership sees fit to set before you, and you do not require time or resources for any other form of creative expression. For example, any pursuit that does not directly aggrandize Arol and her family. So next we move on to babies and children. What happens if I want to have a child while I'm living at Zendik? First, you need permission from Arol. If you get pregnant without permission, and Arol believes, for example, that the father might at some point leave the farm and raise custody issues, she may well order you to have an abortion. How you'll be treated during your pregnancy is a crapshoot. Arol may chastise you for being lazy, or she may treat you temporarily as her favorite. How you'll be treated once you've given birth, on the other hand, can be predicted with perfect accuracy. You will be cruelly and constantly criticized for how you are raising your child. Eventually, assuming you don't leave the farm right after the birth, you will be separated from your child on the grounds that you are an unfit mother. You, the mother, might be asked to leave the farm without your child. You might be coerced into turning the child to her or his father, or another surrogate. You might be required to recommence going on selling trips, with the exception of Fawn, who has never endured a separation, and the possible exception of one woman who left Zendik within 8 months of her child's birth. Every Zendik mother has been forced to cede care of her child to someone else. Why the insistence on separating mothers from children? In order to maintain power, Arol needs every Zendik to be loyal to her above all others. The bond between mother and child, quite possibly the most powerful bond there is, might weaken the mother's and eventually the child's devotion. Therefore, it must be broken. Also, when Arol was very young, she was forced to give up her first child, a son, as she did not have the financial resources to care for him, and her family wouldn't help. It's possible that she is determined, consciously or not, to make all the mothers who are under control suffer as she once suffered. How are children treated at Zendik? It depends on whose children they are. To an extent, all Zendik-born children are treated as demigods. The idea is that because they have not grown up in the death culture, they are purer than anyone else who came to the farm as an adult. They receive special food, they have their own computers, they are credited with being far more hip, and having a far better aesthetic sense than your average grown-up. However, this special treatment only goes so far for children not related by blood to Arol. If a child's mother is someone other than Fawn, she or he is assumed to have inherited her or his parents' corruption. Therefore, she or he can be subject to harsh, often profane criticism, despite her or his protected status. Fawn's children, on the other hand, do not receive input. As third-generation Zendiks, they are believed to possess a preternatural purity that exempts them from any accusation of wrongdoing. If by chance they should exhibit some less than savory behavior, that behavior is attributed to the, quote, corruption of the father. How are Zendik children educated? They are homeschooled in a spotty sort of way. Their teachers do not follow any accredited curriculum or test them to see if they meet minimum standards for their age group. Also, their schooling is far from consistent, since Arol is liable periodically to strip members of their teaching responsibilities on the grounds that they are an ego jack from running their own show. Generally, children raised at Zendik are less than competent at reading, writing, math, and other basic academic skills. Now we move on to environmentalism, activism, and revolution. If one of Zendik's goals is to preserve the ecology, why don't they partner with other environmental groups or link to them on their website? Zendiks do not believe that any other groups are legitimate or effective. They believe that they and they alone are capable of reversing ecological destruction, despite the fact that in the past 4 decades they have made no measurable gains in that direction. Also, quote, saving the planet is merely Arol's stated goal. Her actual goal, which she may or may not be aware of, is to state her desire for power and attention, and to secure a livelihood for herself and her blood family without having to work for it. Yes, I understand that manipulating people is an intense and stressful occupation. What I mean is that Arol's position lets her out of producing a good or service that is useful or valuable to the wider society. Do they at least make an effort to live ecologically? Sort of. Each Zendik occupies less space than the average person, since, with the exception of Arol and company, they live in such close quarters. Also, they grow much of their own food, eat organic, and manufacture biodiesel. However, they drive many miles a week to sell their wares. They make no effort to green the manufacture or distribution of their products. They buy lots of cheap crap at stores like Walmart. They do not recycle. They believe their consumption to be justified and others' consumption to be wasteful, since they are supposedly saving the planet while others are not. What about this revolution they claim to be starting? Doesn't revolution mean dramatic change? What kind of change do they expect to effect by living on a farm and selling stuff on the street? The Zendiks are experts at magical thinking. They believe that as they attain greater and greater levels of cooperation and honesty within their closed society, the blueprint for how to duplicate these gains is spreading to all humans everywhere via an etheric web they call the infinite psychic field. They also believe that each Zendik represents an archetype. For example, is imprinted with certain primal psychological patterns. As a particular Zendik sheds more and more of her or his death culture conditioning and becomes more and more dedicated to the cause, she or he opens the door for all people of that archetype to make the same evolutionary gains. Now we move on to everyday life. What's the food like? The food's great. It's almost entirely organic, and during the growing season, much of the produce is homegrown. Cows and goats provide milk and the raw materials for homemade cheese, ice cream, and yogurt. However, if you eat too much in an attempt to sublimate your desire for control over your own life, watch out. Arol is likely to sneer at you for being fat and demand that you go on a diet. Here's what Arol and Fawn had to say about weight gain at Zendik Farm in 2004. Arol says, "Everyone's getting fat. Zendik women have never been fat." Fawn says, "Yeah, and it's philosophic fat." Shortly thereafter, Arol demanded that we spend less money on food. She also demanded that all Zendik women begin counting calories and consume no more than 1,600 per day. This regimen didn't last long, but I suspect other food controls have been instituted since then. Years ago, when Wulf was still alive, he picked a very low target weight for each woman, even the skinny ones, and put every one of them on a diet. So, people can eat whatever they want? Well, no. Arol, Fawn, and her kids can eat whatever they want. They have their own private kitchen, pantry, and fridge, which one of their handmaids keeps stocked with such luxuries as steak and square ice cream. The rank and file are limited to what's grown on the farm and ordered in bulk. Arol or Fawn reviews all food orders. When I first moved to the farm, dried fruit and peanuts were kept in a 55-gallon drum with a lock on it, and many dents in it from successful burglary attempts. And the rank and file were only permitted to eat peanut butter rice cakes on road trips. You know somebody's a serious control freak when peanut butter is treated as a controlled substance. You mean at one time Zendiks were so desperate for dried fruit and peanuts that they broke into the barrel? Yes, people come to Zendik with many dependencies and many addictions: cigarettes, alcohol, pot, hard drugs. Once they arrive, they're required to abstain from every drug but caffeine and alcohol is only available rarely, and then in ration quantities, unless you're Arol's boyfriend, in which case you may guzzle it at will in your studio and fool her into thinking you have a blood sugar problem, when in fact you're a rip-roaring drunk. Hence, every previous addiction is sublimated onto food. Also, when you've sacrificed control over your life and you're unable to express any negative thoughts in relation to that sacrifice, you may find it expedient to stuff your face rather than face your feelings. What are the living arrangements like? If I move there, will I have any privacy? As far as I know, there are only 2 foolproof ways to guarantee yourself more than a few minutes of alone time if you're a rank and file Zendik. Have a date with yourself or do an enema. Otherwise, expect to be with others. Expect to be interrupted. Expect to be impressed into service regardless of any desire you might have to relax or be by yourself. You will have your own space, that is, a bed and some shelves for your stuff, but you will not have your own room. You may or may not share a room with members of the opposite sex. What do Zendiks do for fun? They pitch each other into a chain-link cage packed with mountain lions to see who's on and who's out of it. Just kidding. Although, come to think of it, that's a pretty good figurative description of living therapy. But that's not what you wanted to know. You wanted to know about fun. Here's the rundown. They play World of Warcraft. I'm not sure if this started before I left or after, but my sources tell me it's all the rage now. Why? Beats me. Maybe because Urs, Fawn's firstborn, enjoys it. In any case, it's close to mandatory now. It's even possible to get input on how you play. But wait, if it's required, does it really qualify as fun? You'd have to ask the Zendiks. My other theory as to why World of Warcraft is the next big thing at Zendik is this. The Zendiks believe that if they triumph in the virtual realm, this will somehow translate, by way of infinite psychic field, see the section on psychic phenomena, into instant hegemony on the physical plane. Far-fetched? Yes, but only a little more so than thinking you and your 22 minions are going to save the world. When I lived at Zendik, we also had alcohol parties, occasionally, with music and dancing. We ate ice cream and other treats on selling trips. We played improv comedy games and watched comedy performances. I doubt either of these entertainments is extant any longer, since 3 out of 4 comedians have left, and the last one standing recently received a blow to the head. Selling could be fun too, on the rare days when I got in the flow early and made lots of money. The Zendiks say they practice something called living therapy. What the hell is that? Living therapy is the rubric under which Zendiks attack each other for perceived failings. Here's a fictionalized example, complete with made-up names. Shiso brings up the fact that Wasabi only made $300 selling in Georgetown last Saturday. Shiso theorizes that Wasabi is out of it, and is a drag to be around, because he's not getting honest about his jealousy. His current love interest, Nori, recently had a date with Tamari. Wakimi jumps in and says, it's not just that Wasabi's jealous of Tamari, Wasabi's totally unfriendly to men in general. He never lets on to the other guys how he really feels. Sure, he needs to start talking about his feelings, but he also better get to work on his bullshit philosophy. Sushi adds, yeah, I think physically he's trying to fuck with our survival because he's competitive with Wulf. He's trying to bring down what Wulf started. The rest of the group nods and murmurs in agreement. Shiso turns to Wasabi and says, well, Wasabi, what do you have to say for yourself? Wasabi, who's beet red and choking back tears, answers, I don't really think... And Tamari cuts him off. Quit being defensive. We're your friends. We're trying to help you. Why don't you just take a deep breath and take the input? Wasabi starts sobbing in earnest and stares down at his fingernails. The group moves on to its next victim. Now we move on to governance and hierarchy. Is Zendik a democracy? No. Does it operate by consensus? No. What's the governing structure then? Dictatorship. What Arol says goes. If the entire group in a meeting decides that X is the appropriate course of action and Arol subsequently enters the room and suggests Y, then the group will instantly change its collective mind and vigorously agree that yes, Y is definitely the way to proceed. Does Zendik have a hierarchy? Yes. What does it look like? Who's on top? It looks like a pyramid, with Arol at the top. Just below Arol includes Fawn, Arol's daughter, Zoe, the father of Fawn's firstborn son and the farm's alpha male, Revel, Arol's boyfriend, Aram, Fawn's husband, and Fawn's 3 children. At the base of the pyramid are the other 15 members, to whom I refer elsewhere in this document as the rank and file. The status of the individuals within the rank and file shifts constantly according to Arol's whim. What would you advise a new member to do if he or she wished to rise in the hierarchy? If you're male, your best bet is to become Arol's or Fawn's boyfriend and or have a child with Fawn. If you're female and looking to secure a position in the aristocracy, good luck. The best you can hope for is to rise within the rank and file by becoming a power seller and or handing over a large inheritance. What are Arol's credentials? What qualifies her to be a leader? Arol has read a few books on anthropology and religion. She has worked in the outside world as a stripper, an actress, and a copy editor. As a child, she ran with a gang in Hell's Kitchen. She is skilled at raising plants and caring for animals. She does not have any training in caring for people. Now we move on to guns. Do the Zendiks have guns? Yes. Most of the adult male Zendiks and some of the adult females possess firearms. Arol also owns a few rifles. None of these guns is used for hunting game. Why do they have them then? To defend themselves in the event of an attack. In my time at the farm, guns came into play twice that I know of. In the spring of 2000, Zoe, who is short, escorted a much taller, stronger member off the farm at gunpoint after this member had attempted to pack a camera that may or may not have belonged to him. In summer of 2004, a few of the higher-ranking Zendik men guarded the perimeter of the property with rifles after a neighbor's jealous ex-husband injured her and killed her boyfriend, then escaped into the woods. Do you think they're kind of a cult that's likely to go postal or commit mass suicide? No, I don't. There's no provision in their cosmology for life after death, so they have little to gain by killing themselves. I do, however, think Arol is capable of violence. She recently hit one of Fawn's ex-boyfriends on the head for something that he said. Also, Zoe, her right-hand man and the farm's alpha male, has punched other members twice that I know of. Also, his name might be Zoe, but it's spelled Z-O-E, so I'm assuming it's Zoe. Now, moving on to healthcare. How does Zendik provide for members' health? Do the Zendiks have health insurance? Zendik provides health care for higher-ranking members. When Arol was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2002, she traveled to an alternative treatment center in Mexico for therapy. The cost of the treatment, not including travel, was $25,000. The farm, for example the sellers, paid the money out of pocket. When a member of the rank and file falls ill, on the other hand, the farm does not pay for treatment. Instead, the member is forced to ask his or her parents for funds. With the exception of babies who are covered by Medicaid, no one at Zendik has health insurance. In general, how do Zendiks prevent or respond to accident or illness? Zendiks believe that they can prevent accidents and illnesses by being on, which means refining their vibes so as to repel negative events, and by erecting psychic shields around themselves. As for a response, if the sick or injured party is Arol or Fawn, the illness or injury is treated, and that's the end of it. If the sick or injured party is one of the rank and file, the group manufactures a psychic cause for the injury or illness. For example, a way to blame the person for having attracted the illness or injury to her or himself. Now, honesty. The Zendiks believe in honesty, right? So if they tell me something, I can believe them? No, the Zendik construction of honesty is not something you or I would recognize. Rather, it's a tiered system in which the truth flows up, from the bottom of the pyramid to the top, but need not flow down or out. That is, the rank and file, which are at the bottom, are required to bear their souls to each other, to the aristocracy, and to Arol. But Arol is not required to disclose her thoughts or feelings to those below her. The aristocrats answer to Arol, but not the rank and file. Similarly, no Zendik, no matter how low on the pyramid, is required to be honest with any member of the death culture, which would be the outside world. To the contrary, Zendiks, especially Zendik sellers, are encouraged to lie to outsiders, especially when lying might help them make money. Zendiks justify their penchant for deception with the claim that they are in a war to save planet Earth. Desperate measures and suspension of morality are justified in wartime. Also, they believe that everyone they cheat, lie to, steal from will ultimately benefit when Zendik takes over the world. One further comment. At Zendik, getting honest often equates either with abasing yourself or getting nasty. Arol regularly attacks and humiliates other members, and is honored for it. Her followers mistake her unchecked venom for a noble devotion to truth. They strive to imitate her in this respect by attacking each other. Usually, the best survival strategy for the person facing attack is to take it. That is, grovel, admit wrongdoing, pledge to change, beg forgiveness. Any resistance to input is dismissed as defensiveness and an inability or unwillingness to face and vanquish inborn corruption. Now moving on to if you have a loved one at Zendik. What can I expect if my son, daughter, brother, sister, friend, boyfriend, girlfriend moves to Zendik Farm? You can expect your loved one to communicate with you less and less as the weeks, then months roll by. When you do speak with your loved one, you can expect either sullen reserve or brittle cheerfulness. You may get an update on the baby goats or the next big selling trip, but you won't hear an honest assessment of your loved one's emotional state. And even if her or his tone is noticeably dull or anxious, you won't hear any admission that he or she is unhappy at Zendik. Mostly, your loved one will avoid contact with you unless she or he wants something from you. Money, usually, or a place for a selling crew to stay. What can I do to help my loved one who lives at Zendik? The most important thing you can do is stay in touch and attempt to cultivate trust. Even though Zendiks are taught to believe that their death culture, families, and friends are corrupting influences on them, it does still help current members to know that there are in fact people beyond the farm who love and care about them no matter what. Should they ever get kicked out or decide to leave, they will at least know they have somewhere to go and someone to go to. The next most important thing you can do is educate yourself about cults and how they work. The best and most up-to-date book I've read on how to extricate a loved one from a cult is Releasing the Bonds, Empowering People to Think for Themselves by Stephen Hassan. Other valuable books are Combating Cult Mind Control, also by Hassan, and Take Back Your Life by Janja Lalick. You can learn the particulars of how Zendik works by making non-threatening, non-judgmental inquiries of your loved one, by visiting her or him at the farm, and by contacting former members. It is, of course, the purpose of this website to provide extensive background information on Zendik, but all the text in the world is no substitute for talking to a real live person. You can also get professional help. You may want to hire Stephen Hassan or another exit counselor or thought reform consultant to help you come up with a plan for how best to reach your loved one. Stephen Hassan gives detailed information about this option in releasing the bonds. Finally, don't give up hope, no matter how long your loved one has lived at Zendik. Some ex-members have rejoined society and created fulfilling lives for themselves after spending 10, 15, 20 years at Zendik. Also, the odds are on your side. Of the hundreds of young adults who have been recruited by Zendik, only 15 still live there. The other 8 either helped start the place or were born there. What happens behind the scenes when I come to visit my loved one at the farm? Before you arrive, your loved one will strategize with others in the group to figure out how she or he can minimize her or his time alone with you. While you're there and or after you leave, Arol will most likely make disparaging remarks about you to your loved one. She will use information given to her and behaviors she observes firsthand to illustrate your corruption. Now I'm going to stop here and release part 2 next Monday. I'll pick up the FAQ about language, money and resources, names, population and demographics, psychic phenomena, selling, sex and relationships, the cult question, and work. You'll also get to hear Helen read a few pieces from her book, Mating in Captivity, which, do not forget, is on sale until January 6th for 99 cents wherever you get your ebooks. I'll also be inserting the 30-minute audio of Wulf Zendik talking to the community in 1996 at the end of next week's episode, so stay tuned for all of that. Until next time, stay safe and take care.